first into the mud. A sniper's bullet had found its mark, then another shot, and the enemy wasn't the bridge. It was us, the ones who believed a strip of steel and timber could ever be worth so many lives. My name is Richard Hayes, First Lieutenant, U.S. Army Engineers, European Theater, 1944. My job was to build and destroy. Roads, fortifications, river crossings, you name it. If the infantry needed a path, we laid it. If command wanted a choke point eliminated, we blew it sky high. That was the rhythm of the war. But this was different. We called it the Black Crossing. A bridge over the Roer River in Germany. On the maps, it was just a thick black line, nothing more than a logistical note for headquarters. But in reality, it was a death sentence waiting to be signed. The order was simple. Take the bridge intact. Destroying it would slow the enemy's retreat, sure, but it would also cripple our own advance. Command insisted that capturing it whole was vital. To them, it was a chess piece. To us, it was a trap waiting to snap shut. We'd seen what the Germans did to bridges when they had time. Charges wired into every girder, snipers hidden in the rafters, mortars zeroed in on the approaches. Every instinct told us it would be the same here. And yet the order came down the line like a stone tablet from on high. Secure the bridge at all costs. All costs. Those two words were the true enemy. Because in war, the cost is always measured in lives. We moved at dawn, fog curling low over the river. Our battalion was stretched thin, a patchwork of engineers, riflemen, and machine gunners. The air was thick with the metallic scent of wet steel and the faint reek of cordite drifting from the night's bombardments. My boots sank into the mud with every step, the kind of sucking mud that tried to keep you from moving forward. I walked beside Sergeant Paul Brenner, my second in command. Paul was a big man from Kansas, the kind who could heft a beam on his own and still crack a joke while doing it. He carried the weight of his men like it was his birthright. "Sir," he said quietly, his breath forming ghosts in the cold air, "this bridge feels wrong, too quiet." He was right. The silence was eerie. Not the natural quiet of morning, but the silence of men waiting in the shadows. We advanced anyway. Orders didn't bend to gut feelings. Halfway across the approach road, I heard it. The crack of a rifle, sharp and final. A man behind me staggered, fell face first into the mud. A sniper's bullet had found its mark. Then another shot, and another. Chaos erupted. My men scrambled for cover as bullets tore through the fog, the sound of each impact a hammer driving home the truth. The bridge was defended, and defended well. I shouted commands, my voice barely carrying over the sudden thunder of machine gun fire. Brenner dragged the wounded back by their webbing, teeth gritted against the weight of both man and gear. Ahead of us, the bridge loomed, a dark silhouette against the pale morning sky. It wasn't just steel and timber. It was a crucible, a place where men would be tested and broken. And in that moment, I knew the bridge would cost more than command had ever imagined. We hit the dirt and crawled, elbows grinding into gravel slick with river mist. The fog gave us cover, but it also swallowed sound and distance, turning every echo into a phantom. I slid up behind a twisted road sign and raised my field glasses. The bridge loomed out of the white like a rib cage, steel trusses black and wet, the deck glistening. That was when I saw it. Thin lines running along the inside of the girders, disappearing into a junction box near the far pier. Det cord. The bridge was wired to blow. Brenner slid in beside me, breath steady despite the gunfire. "Charges," he said. He did not need the glasses. Men like him could smell explosives. "Likely primed. Probably 2 circuits, main and dead man." I lowered the glasses. "They want us to rush it. Then they'll light the fuse and bury us with the river. Or they wait," he said, eyes tracking the truss. "Let us come halfway. Then it costs more." A burst of machine gun fire stitched the road where our men had been seconds before. The rounds sparked off the steel rail and chewed the curb into chalk. I followed the line back to a squat shape tucked into the near side abutment. A bunker, low and mean, with a slit just wide enough for a gun team. There would be another on the far side. Bridges never hunted alone. We needed eyes and we needed a plan. I waved Corporal Willis forward. Lean, quiet, always thinking. Smoke, I said. Then mark that bunker, we bring it down. He nodded and crawled off, low and smooth. Seconds later, the first smoke grenades began to puke gray curtains across the approach. The fog thickened into a wall and our men moved with it, slipping position to position, rifles up, boots sliding in the cold mud. Demo team, I called. On me. They gathered fast. 4 men who carried their fear like everyone else but carried their satchel charges like old friends. There was Private Levy from Boston, too young for the lines around his eyes. Torres, a carpenter before the war who could read wood like scripture. Dugan, who never smiled. And Ames, the quiet genius who could tie a blasting cap with numb fingers in the dark. I drew a rough map in the mud with my finger. Primary charge boxes here and here, I said, marking the near junction and the one I had glimpsed on the far pier. Expect boosters tucked deep along cords. Wires routed under the walkway. They will have a manual plunger on the far bank and a secondary with a pull igniter somewhere on the structure. We cut both. We do not yank. We do not guess. Brenner looked at me. Under or over? Under, I said. If they anticipate a rush, they are sighted for the deck. Current looks ugly, but under keeps us out of the kill lane. We take climbing hooks, go down the near pier, shimmy the underside, and work the first junction. When that is dead, we signal and decide if the far pier is even possible. He grunted. Possible is a dangerous word. Everything about this is dangerous, I said. We do it anyway. Willis's smoke curled thicker. The bunker's chatter faded, smothered. Our machine guns answered from the tree line, low and methodical. For a moment, the world narrowed to gray and the wet hiss of the river. We moved. The near pier was slick, patches of algae turning the stone to soap. Brenner went first, boots feeling for edges, hands sure. I followed, then Levy, then the rest in a file that hugged the pier like it might hug us back. We reached the waterline and the cold stabbed through our uniforms, a pain so clean it took your breath and anything like doubt. Hooks bit steel. We slung ourselves under the deck, bodies pressed to the belly of the bridge. The river shoved at us in heavy surges that made the steel hum against our ribs. Above, boots thudded, enemy feet moving along the parapet. Too close. We kept going. The first junction box waited like a heart. Gray metal, 2 padlocks, wires laced through in tight, practiced knots. Ames exhaled. Redundant, he whispered. Series here, parallel there. If we cut wrong, it arms the backup. Take your time, I said, though time was something we did not have. The fog thinned, then thickened again. Through a gap in the smoke, I saw shapes moving on the far bank. A team clustering around a field phone in a squat crate. The plunger. If they had a line of fire to our side of the river, they could bury us with one push. Brenner saw them too. We need that bunker blind, he murmured. As if on cue, a mortar round from our rear landed short of the slit. The next one kissed the embrasure. The third crawled inside and turned the bunker into a cough of dust and fire. Our men cheered, a low, tired sound that still carried across the water. Now, Ames whispered. His pick worked at the first lock, patient and mean. It gave with a soft click. He eased the lid and we all leaned in. Wires braided tight, fuses capped and taped, a craftsman's work. He traced the path with a knife tip, then pinched one line gently between thumb and forefinger. This one, he said. Kill the main. Do it, I said. His cutters closed. A tiny metallic bite, almost polite. Nothing happened. No bang, no hiss. Just the river and our breathing and the pounding of my own heart. One dead, Ames said. Secondary in the cap well. Give me a minute. A minute felt like a year. Above, a shout in German cut through the fog. The plunger crew on the far side stood and pointed. They had seen something. Maybe the ruined bunker, maybe the movement on our bank, maybe the way the smoke curled wrong where our men crawled. Whatever it was, their hands went to the handle. Lieutenant, Brenner said, voice flat. I see it, I answered. Ames? Almost, he said. His hands never stopped moving. Almost. And that was the bridge right then. A handful of wires between a river and a decision. A handful of heartbeats between keeping it standing or letting it take us all under. Ames' cutters hovered, sweat dripping from his brow despite the cold. His lips moved as he whispered the sequence to himself, tracing the logic of another man's trap. We all held our breath, pressed against the steel belly of the bridge, listening to the groan of the current below and the shuffle of boots above. Then the line parted with a clean snip. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The river rushed on. The bridge hummed. The enemy across the water still stood at their plunger, waiting. Ames exhaled. Secondary disabled. Relief spread through me like warmth, but Brenner's voice cut it short. That's one side. The far pier is still live. I looked across the gray sweep of the river. The fog shifted, and for an instant I saw the trusses silhouetted against the sky. Wires gleaming faintly as they ran down into the far junction. Men guarded it. Too many. And to reach it, we'd have to cross the open deck or take the river itself. "Lieutenant," Brenner said, "if we go over the top, they'll cut us to ribbons. If we swim it, we'll lose men to the current before the Krauts even fire a shot." He wasn't wrong. Either choice was blood. That was the cost written into the order. We climbed back up to the roadbed, keeping low as the smoke thinned. On the far side, the enemy had grown bold. Their rifles cracked through the mist, bullets pinging off the steel rails. One of our boys cried out and went down clutching his leg. Doc Vance crawled through the muck, dragging him back, calm as a man fetching firewood. That's how it always was, chaos around us and Doc steady as stone. Behind me, Brenner spat in the mud. "This isn't about the bridge anymore. It's about how many of us they'll take before we call it." I thought of the order. Secure the bridge intact. Not try. Not if possible. It was written like certainty, but out here, certainty was just another lie. I keyed the handset. "Command, this is Hayes. First junction box disabled. Secondary suspected across the far pier. Enemy entrenched, heavy resistance. Request permission to destroy structure. Repeat, recommend demolition." Static hissed. Then the voice came back. Flat, official, blind to mud and blood. "Negative, Hayes. Orders stand. Secure bridge intact, at all costs." All costs. Again, as if the words didn't weigh a ton. Brenner heard it too. He didn't curse, didn't rage. He just looked at me with eyes that said, "Then it's on us to pay the bill." We rallied what men we had. Willis laid smoke again. His last, grenades. Machine gunners dug into the ditches, pouring fire across the approaches. Then I pointed to 3 men, Ames, Torres, and Levy. "With me. We're taking the river." The current was colder than steel, black water that clawed and pulled, but the smoke covered us. We kicked and shoved, rifles slung across our backs, demo kits tied high. Every second was a fight not to be swept downstream. By the time we slammed against the far pier, my lungs burned and my arms shook. Hands clawed steel, boots scraped slick stone, and we dragged ourselves onto the ledge beneath the truss. Above, German voices barked orders. Boots stomped. They knew we were close. We crawled into the shadow of the far junction box. Ames was already pulling his picks, eyes burning with a feverish light. "More redundant lines," he muttered. "Triple this time." They weren't taking chances. Gunfire rattled above us. One of our men cried out across the river. Brenner's voice carried, hoarse with fury. "Move it, Lieutenant. We can't hold much longer." I looked at Ames. His hands trembled, but his eyes were locked on the wires like a surgeon on an artery. One wrong move and the whole span would light up beneath us. And in that moment, I understood the truth. This bridge wasn't just costing us lives, it was eating us whole. One decision at a time. Ames' hands were slick with river water, trembling as he teased apart the last set of wires. Torres held the flashlight low, its beam shielded by his palm, barely enough to see by. Levy crouched behind us, rifle ready, eyes darting into the mist. Every shadow above sounded like boots on steel. Every breath seemed loud enough to give us away. "Almost there," Ames whispered, sweat dripping down his nose. His fingers pinched one line, traced it, then shifted to another. "Redundant, like I said. They rigged this to blow no matter who tried to cut it, clever bastards." I heard the crack of rifles from the far bank. Brenner's squad was still holding, still laying down fire to keep us alive. I imagined him crouched in the mud, jaw clenched, spitting curses with every trigger pull. Each shot was a message. "Hurry the hell up, Lieutenant." Then came the rattle of boots above us. Harsh German voices too close. Livy raised his rifle, eyes wide. I pressed his barrel down. "No shots," I mouthed. A single bullet fired here would draw the whole hornet's nest on top of us. Aim's voice cut through the tension. Got it. Last one, just need... A shout rang out overhead. A flashlight beam stabbed down between the trusses, catching Torres square in the face. The German's voice barked, panicked, then rose in alarm. No time! Ames hissed. His cutters snapped. Sparks spat. The wires went limp. At that same instant, boots thundered above. A rifle fired. The bullet punched through steel inches from my ear, ringing like a bell. Levy roared and returned fire, dropping the man leaning over the edge. Chaos exploded. Back in the river, I shouted. We dove as gunfire erupted from the far bank. Bullets stitched the water around us, splashing like angry fists. The current seized us, dragging us downstream. I fought to keep my head above water, lungs screaming, arms burning. Levy went under once, twice before Torres grabbed him and hauled him up. By the time we staggered onto the near bank, half drowned, Brenner's men were down to their last magazines. Smoke clung low. Gunfire echoed across the water, and the bridge still loomed between us and salvation. Did you do it? Brenner barked, grabbing my arm. Ames collapsed onto the mud, chest heaving. Both junctions cut. She won't blow unless they rewire. Relief surged, then shattered as another mortar round shrieked overhead and burst behind us. Earth and metal rained down. We couldn't stay pinned here. I grabbed the radio handset from Big Tom. Static hissed, then a voice cut through. Hayes, this is command. Status? I stared at Brenner. His face was mud-streaked, bloody and hard. He gave a short nod. I pressed the key. Bridge secure. Both junctions neutralized. Enemy resistance heavy. Request immediate reinforcement or artillery. If we don't get cover, we'll be overrun. The line buzzed. Then command answered. Negative artillery, Hayes. Bridge must remain intact. Reinforcements en route. Hold until relieved. Hold. Until relieved. I lowered the handset, the words like lead in my chest. Reinforcements were hours away, if they made it at all. And we were running out of men. Brenner looked at me, jaw tight. Then this is it. We hold the damn bridge. I raised my rifle, checked the chamber, and took my place on the line. Around us, exhausted men did the same. None of us said the truth out loud. This wasn't holding. This was bleeding until command decided the bridge was worth enough bodies. And in that moment, I realized the order's price. It wasn't just the bridge that would cost too much, it was us. The first wave came at dawn. We'd been crouched behind sandbags and twisted metal all night, nerves wound so tight we jumped at every crack of wood in the fire. When the light finally bled through the mist, it wasn't comforting. It just meant they could see us. Shapes emerged on the far bank, German infantry spreading out, rifles low, moving like shadows across the fog. The bridge stretched between us like a thin, fragile spine. They wanted it. We had orders to deny them. Steady, Brenner muttered, his voice calm even. He crouched beside me, helmet low over his brow. He had the look of a man already halfway to the grave. Wait for my mark. Our rifles were trained on the bridge. Mud stuck to my cheek where it pressed against the stock. I could feel my heart thudding in my teeth. Then Brenner gave the word. Now! The line erupted. Rifles cracked. Machine guns spat fire. The first wave stumbled, fell, but others kept coming. They pressed forward in disciplined bursts, leapfrogging across the planks. The bridge itself rattled under the weight of their boots. Torres' bar thundered beside me, brass casings clinking against the steel. Levy lobbed a grenade. It bounced once, then sent a plume of wood and smoke into the air. Screams followed, swallowed quickly by the roar of gunfire. But they kept coming. Always more. Mortars began to fall, thudding into the mud around us. One landed close, too close, showering us with muck and splinters. Doc Vance shouted, dragging a man whose leg was shredded. The cries tore at me, but I forced myself to keep firing. You don't stop. Not unless you want more men on the ground. Hours blurred. Attack, repulse, reload, repeat. By mid-morning, the bridge looked like hell itself. Bodies sprawled across the planks, rifles clattering into the river below. Smoke hung low, curling around us, choking. Ames crawled to me, his face gray, sweat streaking the grime. They won't stop, Lieutenant. You know that, right? They'll keep coming until we break. I knew it. We all knew it, but there was no choice. The order was clear. Hold until relieved. That phrase, until relieved, echoed in my head like a curse. Relief could mean hours, could mean never. Another wave charged, this time covered by machine gun fire from the tree line. Brenner was everywhere at once, shouting, dragging men into cover, firing, reloading, firing again. He was the kind of leader you follow even when you hate the orders. I leaned into my rifle, aimed at a figure charging across the planks. Young. Too young. His helmet too big, his rifle shaking in his grip. My finger squeezed, and for a moment, just a flicker, I hated myself. Then he fell, and another took his place. By midday, our ammo was running low. Torres' bar barrel glowed hot, smoke curling from it. Hendricks counted grenades on his bandolier. 3 left. Levy's hands shook as he fed belts into the machine gun. Brenner crouched beside me, eyes blazing. We can't hold like this, not without resupply. I know. My throat was dry, voice ragged. I thought of the radio, of Command's calm voice ordering us to bleed for this bridge. I thought of the river below, swollen, waiting to swallow us all. And for the first time, I felt the weight of the title forming in my head. The bridge that cost too much, because no matter what Command thought, we were paying the price in blood. By the afternoon, the bridge wasn't just a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The planks were slick with mud and blood. Rifles lay abandoned where men had fallen, and the air reeked of cordite and iron. Smoke curled upward in thin, bitter ribbons mingling with the mist that never seemed to leave the valley. Our numbers were thinning. Hendricks was gone, a mortar shell having found him as he sprinted across the embankment. Torres had taken shrapnel in the shoulder but refused to leave his bar, his good arm bracing it while Doc tried to keep him from bleeding out. Levy's machine gun jammed twice, and each time he pounded it with a curse and tears streaming down his face. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were animals cornered on a patch of earth we hadn't asked for, ordered to hold by men who weren't here to see the cost. "Ammo's almost gone," Ames reported, voice cracked and raw. He shook a pouch. 3 magazines rattled like dice in a cup. "That's it." I looked down the line. Empty bandoliers hung from belts like useless decorations. Grenades? 2, maybe 3 among us all. Brenner met my eyes and I saw what he was thinking. This bridge wouldn't hold much longer. Still we fought. Each shot counted. Every bullet a prayer, every trigger pull a desperate bargain with fate. When the next wave came, they came harder. Not just rifles now, but half-tracks rumbling up the road, their engines growling like beasts. The rattle of their mounted guns tore through our defenses. Sandbags exploded into dust. Men dove flat, pressing themselves into the mud. Levy screamed as a burst cut across the parapet, his helmet spinning away, his body crumpling beside the gun he had fed all morning. Doc crawled to him, but I knew it was useless before I even looked. We were unraveling. I pressed the radio handset to my mouth, shouting over the chaos. "Command, this is Falcon. We are low on ammo, high casualties, requesting immediate reinforcement or fire support." Static crackled back. Then the cold, detached voice. "Hold the bridge. Reinforcements en route. ETA 1 hour. 1 hour." We didn't have 1 hour. Brenner spat into the mud, his voice low but fierce. "We'll buy them their damn hour with what's left of us." I wanted to argue, to scream that no bridge was worth this, but the men were looking at me, waiting for an order. I couldn't give them despair, so I nodded. We hold. The next minutes blurred. Shots, screams, smoke. Torres, barely conscious, still firing bursts until the barrel glowed. Ames beside me, his rifle cracking with the rhythm of a drum beat. Doc working on 3 men at once, his hands covered in blood that wasn't his own. Through it all, Brenner stood like a statue, barking commands, steadying the line with sheer force of will. Every time a man faltered, his voice dragged them back. Every time I felt the weight crush me, his eyes pulled me upright. The Germans pressed closer, the planks groaning under their boots. At one point, I could see their faces clearly, young and terrified, no different than ours. And still we traded death back and forth like it was the only language left. By the time the sun began to sink, our world was reduced to a few yards of mud and wood, held together by nothing but stubbornness and blood. And in my gut, I knew, whatever happened next, this bridge had already cost too much. Dusk fell heavy and red. the sky smeared with smoke. For hours we'd fought like cornered wolves, clinging to every inch of the bridge. But even wolves tire, even wolves bleed. Our ammunition was nearly gone. Torres Bar fell silent at last, the bolt locking open, his chest rising and falling like bellows. He slumped against the parapet, eyes glazed, whispering for his mother in Spanish. Doc pressed a hand to his wound, but I could see the truth in his face. Torres was fading. Ames fired his last round, tossed the empty rifle aside, and grabbed a bayonet. "Guess it's steel now, Lieutenant," he said with a grim smile. There was no fear in him, only defiance. Across the river, the Germans regrouped. Their shouts echoed across the water, hard and commanding. Then they came. Another wave, larger than any before. Boots thundered on the planks, rifles spitting fire, grenades arcing through the haze. "Hold!" Brenner roared. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Don't give them an inch!" We met them in the center of the bridge. Bullets, fists, steel. The fight collapsed into chaos. No lines, no formations, just men tearing at each other in the fading light. I swung my rifle like a club, wood splintering on a helmet. Ames drove his bayonet into a chest, only to be pulled down beneath 3 bodies. His screams were swallowed by the roar. Levy's machine gun lay silent, jammed for good. Hendricks was gone. Torres barely breathed. We were down to scraps of a platoon, and still they pressed forward. I caught sight of Brenner, his face streaked with blood, his helmet gone. He fought like a man already dead, a fury in his eyes that held the enemy back by sheer will. Every time he fell, he rose again, dragging others with him. But we were breaking. I felt it in my bones. Then above the thunder of boots and rifles came a new sound. The distant chop of rotor blades. Helicopters, reinforcements. Hope. "Smoke!" Brenner bellowed. I fumbled at my belt, found the last canister, and pulled the pin. Yellow plumes poured into the dusk, curling like a beacon above the slaughter. The Hueys crested the ridge, miniguns spinning, tracers stitching across the far bank. The Germans faltered, stumbled, fell back under the storm of fire. Our attackers were forced into cover, their momentum broken. But the cost had already been paid. I staggered to Brenner's side. He leaned against the railing, a dark stain spreading across his chest. His eyes found mine, steady, unblinking. "Bridge. Held," he rasped. His hand gripped my arm, iron strong despite the blood. "Don't let them forget us." I opened my mouth to answer, but his eyes slipped shut. His grip loosened, and just like that, the man who had carried us through hell was gone. The Hueys set down on the near bank. Reinforcements poured out, weapons blazing, pushing the enemy back across the river. But I barely saw it. All I could see was Brenner, lying still, his blood seeping into the wood he'd sworn to hold. We were saved, but we were broken. And as I looked around at the ruin, the shattered planks, the smoke, the bodies, I knew this bridge had cost too much, far, far too much. When the shooting stopped, silence did not come. The air was filled with the whir of rotor blades, the groans of the wounded, and the shouted orders of fresh men moving into positions we had bled for. The enemy had pulled back across the river, their bodies scattered among the reeds, their guns abandoned in the mud. We had held. But victory didn't feel like victory. I stumbled across the planks, stepping over helmets, weapons, faces I would never forget. Brenner lay where he'd fallen, his blood dried dark against the wood. They would call him a hero, the man who saved the bridge. But to me, he was more than that. He was the reason we had lasted as long as we did, the reason any of us were still breathing. "Lieutenant," Doc said softly, his hands trembling as he closed Brenner's eyes, "you need to get to the chopper." I shook my head. "Not until he goes first." We carried him together, a body that felt impossibly heavy for the man who had carried all of us. Onto the waiting Huey, laid among the others. No ceremony, no words. Just the quiet respect of men who understood what sacrifice really meant. As the Huey lifted, the bridge shrank beneath us, a thin line of wood and steel, scarred and broken, stretching across a river swollen with blood. I thought of the orders. Hold until relieved. We had obeyed, but at what cost? Back at the field hospital, they tallied the numbers. 2/3 of our platoon gone, dozens more wounded. Reinforcements had secured the bridge, yes, but it had become a monument to waste as much as to valor. The inquiry came days later. Three officers at a folding table, their questions crisp, their pens scratching. They wanted times, coordinates, casualty counts. They wanted facts that could be filed away neatly. What they didn't want was the truth, that no bridge is worth more than the men who defend it. Their report read like all reports do. Objective secured, enemy repelled, bridge held. It would look good in a file. It would please someone in an office 1,000 miles away. But the real report was written in the empty bunks, in the dog tags handed to mothers and wives, in the silence that settled over the survivors who had seen too much to ever be the same. I carried Brenner's name with me. Every time I crossed a bridge, I thought of him. Every time I heard wood groan under weight, I remembered the sound of boots pounding across planks under fire. The bridge didn't just cost us men, it cost us pieces of ourselves. Years later, when I sat down in a quiet hall to finally tell this story, I felt his voice in mine. Not to glorify, not to condemn, but to remember. Because if we forget, then the cost becomes meaningless. So I tell you now, we held that bridge. We followed the order. But what it took from us can never be repaid. And if you listen closely, if you ever walk across an old bridge on a misty morning, you might hear echoes in the planks, not of triumph, but of warning. The bridge was ours, but it cost too much. If this story moved you, if you believe the sacrifices of soldiers should never be forgotten, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story we tell keeps their memory alive.